It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at the Beholder number 15. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today from June of 1980, this is the Beholder number 15. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're continuing to enjoy the new year, and I hope you're enjoying this series of videos. We have been looking at the Beholder fanzine for a number of weeks now, and we're a little more than halfway through this run. This is, as I mentioned, the product of Guy Duke and Mike Stoner with some input from other folks. One thing I'll say here at the beginning, if you look at the video, and I put a note in there for number 13 and 14, there was their editorial page was at least half that text was like swapped. The table of contents was backwards. And so the attribution for the art on the cover page was backwards. And like I said, I put a note in there to try and correct that. So that was just a little oddity I noticed after I finished making those videos, that they had those things backwards. Here's our cover. There's no a clear attribution given. It looks like there's some very small initials here. The same initials are in a number of places throughout. It looks like JD, M or N or W. So that's not particularly helpful. And I haven't figured out who that person is. So I'm going to continue to do some research and see if I can figure out who the artist is. But I like it quite a bit. You've got the circle here, and you'll see a few of these coming forward now have sort of this circle with art drawn in it or coming across the edges. The original one is 45 pence green cover. You can't see because of the green screen. And several other iterations. I also have this one, which is pink, which is the fourth printing with a 60 pence version. But you've got this barbarian here. He's got the snake wrapped around him at the bottom, and he's got the lizard creature or frog man he's got up at the top. He's getting ready to hurl away. Pretty good fantasy art. Some longer articles this time, so not as many things. You got the editorial, an article on rolling up your NPCs, a way to make it a little quicker, they think. The executioner class, monster combat modes, it's basically helping you create new monsters. A word search puzzle, some new monsters that connect to the adventure this time. A short article on Traveler, and then the Tunnels of Tungan, which is our Dungeons and Dragons adventure. This one is from Davies, not by Guy Duke. And then Chronicle, which is a continued narration of the playthrough of the City-State of the Invincible Overlord World campaign that they've been doing now off and on for the last few issues. Guy and Mike, of course. Tim Illson has an article. Graham Staplehurst does that word search. And then Simon Washbourne has a contribution as well. Again, as you know, the covers change. Often the price, of course, changes, and then sometimes the color of the cover changes. Always heavy stock and then paper. That's the 50 pence, which would have been the first reprint. Then there's a 55. I don't have a copy of that. And then the 60. Their editorial. And this one, they say, is just a little bit late. And also, the last time they're going to include the little subscription slip in there. They say basically you kind of have to keep track of that on your own from now on. If you run out, you'll find out because your subscription will stop. They also apologize for the delay. If you remember, they did a sort of a survey as well as a competition contribution, articles, adventures, whatever you happen to send in. They were doing this competition. And the results of both have been pretty good and been pretty overwhelming because they've been spending time trying to dig through and get their competition winners sorted out and get their survey results shared. So that'll come in a future issue. And they almost always now comment on back issues. Right now, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 13, and 14 are available. And then the 15, they haven't run out of those yet. Obviously, that's this issue. People have been asking for others, but they say, we didn't print them yet, but as demand increases, we'll do some reprinting of those as well. Here's their article on how to roll up NPCs, and I think that the reason they motivated this was to say, look, every character class has some minimum attributes. As the Dungeon Master, you probably start off knowing what you want. This is going to be a magic user. This NPC is going to be a thief or a ranger. And so the way they've designed this chart, you know what you need that character to get, right? And so if an attribute, like the first row is it can be anything from a 3 to 18. As you move down, let's say you had a character class that needed a 17, you'd be all the way at the very last row where you said, it's either going to have to be a 17 or an 18. There's only two choices. And so you pick, in particular, those stats that need a minimum based on the rules for the character class that you're trying to create, or NPC class you're trying to create. And then you roll a percentile dice, and it basically tells you, let's say your minimum was a 13. So you're down here a few rows from the bottom. And if you get a 30 or less, you get a 12, 13, 56, 75, 87, 95, all the way up to 98. You might end up with an 18. That's basically the way it works. I get it. It's, is it more helpful? I don't know. Of course, nowadays you have computers that can generate numbers for you, and that's probably a lot quicker. But back in the day, I think if I was rolling up a character, I would just give them the stats they needed, right? I'd roll. If they had a character attribute that was too low, I would just increase it from whatever it was up to the minimum, and then I'd be done. Simon Washbourne has our new character class, the Executioner. Not a huge fan of this. I've seen variations of this, whether it be an NPC or PC class a few times, and just the way we played our game, we never really wanted someone whose chief goal was to, lop somebody's head off. And indeed, that is not only his goal, but one of his special abilities. So they'll let you be any evil alignment or any neutral alignment. They get 10-sided hit dice. They're a subclass of the fighter. Strength has to be a 15. Constitution and dexterity both have to be 9. And they can be humans or half orcs, male or female. And then they've got their the different names, titles they get as they level up there. So the bottom one, you have your level, and then you have your percentage chance to sever somebody's neck and your percentage chance to torture your victim. And for that one, you compare your level to the level of the victim, and you come across, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So first, the neck severing ability. So if you are an executioner and you have a two-handed sword or a great axe, and you score 4 or more above what you needed to hit, then you're going to lop their neck off, or at least you have a chance, right? So you've made a near the neck strike. You roll based on your level. So 4th level, you have a 40% chance. So you've done that excellent to hit roll. You roll a D100. If you're under 40, then the guy's neck's been severed and off goes the head. If you miss, and you're using the great axe or the two-handed sword, which are apparently the two chosen weapons for this, you get extra damage. First to 4th level doubled, 5th to 10th tripled, 11th and over, you get quadruple damage. If you're not using one of your two sort of favored weapons, any other weapon basically, right, then you get to roll your percentile dice, and if it's successful, then all you do is get the damage multiplier. Right, so you can only lop someone's head off with the great axe or two-handed sword as your weapon. And then otherwise, everything, no matter what weapon it is, if you don't exceed by 4 to hit, you're just going to get normal damage. Then for the torturing, you have to have some uninterrupted time, 20 minutes or more, generally, to do your torturing and try to get the information out of them. The DM would roll, because if you fail, then you could either get false information, you get no information, they basically resist, or they die. And the DM determines all of that. And so anyway, I don't really think it's my cup of tea to role play the torturing of people, but clearly a number of people created this character class and thought it would be a fun thing to play, or just it seemed like a logical extension of the books, sword and sorcery books they were reading, I guess. Okay, so they call this monster combat mode. It's just, as they say, a little alphabetical list you could use for monster character creation. And it's just alphabetical list of words like adhesive, bite, blind, bounce, acid breath, cold breath, chlorine breath, head or butt of some sort, cause insanity, cause magic to malfunction, change your victim into a slime monster, etc. And they just think, read these for inspiration. And if you don't know what, and think of something interesting for your new monster to do, these are some things you might sort of, basically attributes are suggested by these words that you would give to your new monster to make them somehow a little bit more creative. Here is the word search by Graham Staplehurst. Always like these things, and it's a little bigger here. So if you want to pause and take a look at it yourself. And so what Graham says is, look, I've given you, there are 74 monsters in the word search. I've given you some of them down below here. That's the list at the bottom, but not all of them. They can go obviously in any direction. He says one monster, the beholder, is given to you in the matrix, although frankly, it's not marked, so I guess it's one that you have to find. He's given you half of the 74 monsters, and the other ones you just have to figure out what the monster is, and then find the word. And if you get done, there will be 9 letters not used. And if arranged correctly, will give you a famous name. And so that's the competition. And this is all but one of the other words you have to find that they didn't give you will be in the monster manual. I think that means they're monsters, but they don't say that for certain. The first person who calls Mike Stoner and tells him what the 9 letters spelled that weren't marked off and weren't inside of any of these words wins the competition. And they'll announce you in the next issue. Okay, always fun stuff. Here are a number of monsters that are in the adventure Tunnels of Tungan. And this is by Davies, and I sort of feel like this is a little bit like S3 or S4, where you get the booklet with the adventure, and then you get a number of new monsters, which is, I think, a great idea because it gives the characters challenges that they're not used to. Let's take a look at our new monsters. Okay, so the first thing here is the Gethrix, and it is this, I think it's this reptilian creature. It has big claws on the feet, and then it can carry weapons not only in its hands but also with its tail. So they can get 3 attacks with different magical weapons. Then you get these really odd-looking people called the Guron, and I can't tell. They look like they don't have any legs from the drawings. And again, these drawings, I don't know if it's Guy Duke. He normally does most of the illustrations, and many of these don't have any initials in them at all. They dwell in secluded caves near a water source, and they normally eat fish, and they attack with their sharp claws, and they can jump up to 10 feet high. They're lawful evil. It says they will be polite to people who come to them in peace, and especially if you bring them a gift of some fish. And they can concentrate and split in about 30 minutes into 2 identical versions of themselves. And they do that whenever someone in their group dies to try to maintain the number in their clan. Then we have this really cool looking bird. This is the Gripfil. They are in large flocks of 10 to 100 2-hit dice monsters, and they love fruit. And so in fact there is in the adventure there is a fruit grove that has attracted a cluster of these things. And if you get up there, start messing with their fruit, you're gonna be in bad shape. And they're normally docile, but if you get into their fruit, they can attack you, and you can see they've got like a sharp little point on the end of the tail. And again, mostly they're not going to attack, but they'll swarm all around you in case you try to take their fruit. Then the next creature, which is quite neat and figures kind of heavily in the adventure because there's several of these things called rock krathens. And it's a burrowing reptile that gets food by trapping a victim somewhere underground. And what they tend to do is dig, they'll tunnel through rock, but they'll dig these pits and put a covering over them so they're basically like a chance to detect secret doors to see it. And then they're intelligent enough, they will bring something of value like gold or gems and put a little pile on the far side of the pit so that a greedy party will rush to try and get to the treasure and fall into the pit and then get hurt and obviously trapped. That's their common, I guess, technique they like to use. Then we get this guy, the Siamese Ogre. They put one in the adventure. Wasn't necessary, but they did. They seem to be attached here in a weird way, like maybe at the shoulder and the knee, it looks like. Function separately, separate hit dice. And in fact, in the adventure, the one you meet is one half of it is injured. But other than that, they're just ogres. This is the Skullet, the arch enemy of the Gurons, those little guys that were crawling out of the water that like to eat fish. They hang around near riverbanks and cliff faces in colonies of 10 to 20, and they jump at you and try and scratch you, and if they can scratch you, they get a hold of you and bite you as well. The wings are enough to help them sort of jump really high, but not actually take flight and fly away. Then we have this guy who's quite interesting. He looks like a moss-covered roper in a way. This is the Squark. And the Squark is a head with a lot of really long hair and a chompy little mouth there in the middle. And the older they get, the longer the hair gets. The problem, of course, is you can't really damage hair. And so a lot of times you will take a hit on the body, which is the hair, but it doesn't actually take away any hit dice because there's nothing there except for hair. So that's the Squarky, and there's quite a few of those little guys running around in the dungeon. This is my favorite guy. This is the Tirakani. And they have this very comical looking face and this really nasty looking hook tail, right? And if they come after you, they will try to, they might bite you, but then they'll stick you with this hooked tail. It does 1 to 4 points of damage. And there can be some poison in there. That does 1 to 10 points of damage on a successful hit. And finally, there's this sort of mouse-shapen looking creature called the Zilix. And it has this hump on its back that secretes a type of goo that they can use to bind rocks together. And what they tend to do is go into a passageway and divide it down the middle and sort of build like a false wall to keep everybody else on one side of the wall, and then they can go back and forth on their side of the wall undetected, and they're able to sort of burst through the wall if they want and come after you and just sort of attack you. And as they say, the easiest way to kill them is if you puncture that hump, then that goo will, the sort of mucus will ooze out all over the creature, and then it will, when it hardens, they'll become immobile and unable to move. So there you go. Those are the new monsters for the adventure that comes a little later. This is Timothy Illson's article on Traveler. And as he says, why can't these aliens be player characters too? And he's got one in mind called the Kryn. It's a reptilian race, looks a little bit like that. And he's got some statistics for that, so you can put these creatures into your next Traveler adventure. He's got thoughts on their background and their various abilities they would have. All right, here is our adventure. As you can see, it's quite long. This is Dave Davies, The Tunnels of Tungan. It's pretty good. So it's an old, partially abandoned dwarven mining area, and the top level was abandoned by the dwarves, and now has been inhabited by some typical things like orcs and so forth. And then the dwarves now have tunneled out separate entrances so they can come into the second and third level. This probably, here's our maps. Here's the first level. And I like it. It's got some things where this passageways slope down and come underneath of other ones. Be kind of challenging to map around. We've got 2 different bands of orcs in here that do not like each other, so maybe you can set them off against each other, or I've got a random roll chart for what's happening in the dungeon, because remember, they have big in this concept of a living dungeon. Make the dungeon have things going on, whatever, regardless of what the characters do. And one of those things is these orcs might decide to fight each other, and then it's chaos. Just a couple little clusters where the different orcs are. Those little rock lizards are in here tunneling around. There's little circles you can barely see on here where they've set different pit traps up with with some treasure there to try and attract you to fall into their pits. And of course, you can get down to the lower levels, and these levels 2 and 3 are where the dwarves have set up home base as well. It's pretty good. Probably really, really long session, or probably 2 sessions, I would say, to work your way through this. And then finally, we have the story or the narrative of their playthrough in the city-state, the Invincible Overlord campaign world. And it's just, the story of the party as they're trekking along. Nothing particularly happens this time. There's some wolves that chase them across the bridge, and one of the party members sets it on fire. And so while the wolves don't get across, it cuts off their escape. And so they're feeling a little nervous about where they are. They set up their camp with a tripwire. And right at the end of this narration, the tripwires get sprung and goes off, and they're about to be attacked by some kind of creatures that are sneaking around in the wilderness. Again, there's this art throughout. I don't know who it is. It just looks like JDN, JDW. To me, we got the magic user up here, this little gnome guy, some type of genie coming out of a bottle, magic user, evil priest, demon, and a couple of drawings of warriors. Again, just like to share the art with folks. And then the normal stuff on the back page. That's it for our look at the Beholder number 15, the latest in our Fanzine Friday series as we work our way through the Beholder. They go all the way to issue number 29, and there's a few supplements, sort of best of compilations that I have. We'll share those with you guys as well. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Hope you're enjoying the series, and I hope you're subscribed. If you have friends who enjoy the content, please send them our way, and hopefully they'll be part of the community as well. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.